I'm Emma Shercliffe from Laxfield Literary Associates, and I'm here with three writers from the Inkubator scheme who I will ask to introduce themselves in a moment. Just a little word about me. So I'm a literary agent. I set up Laxfield Literary back in 2020 here in sunny Suffolk in the east of England, specifically as an intervention to set up a literary agency outside of London, where most literary agencies are based. And I work primarily with authors in my region in Norfolk and Suffolk, and then also authors from underrepresented backgrounds from wherever they may be. And I do a lot of work with writers from Africa, based in Africa and elsewhere. So can I ask the three of you to introduce yourselves? So we have Zanta, Josephine and Salma with us. So Zanta, may I start with you? Would you like to just give us a little introduction, who you are, what you're doing at the moment, and perhaps why you wanted to apply for the incubator scheme?
Well, yeah, I think I wanted to apply for the program because I think it was an opportunity for me to try writing in a different way. I think I felt that I was writing the same thing over and over again. And I think the great thing about the incubator program, yeah, it just gave us opportunity to kind of try new ways to write, new styles, new genres, importantly. So I think that was mainly my focus on getting onto the incubator fellowship. And I really think it really just, has opened my mind in that direction.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Josephine. Similar to Zanta, I think I wanted to kind of embrace the challenge. I'd always kind of been a bit of a closet writer. I never really believed in, I guess, maybe the gift or the skill, the ability. But I guess the pandemic sort of gave me, outside of two toddlers, gave me time to just like to write and to kind of experiment and just see. And I really enjoyed it. And I saw the opportunity for SSDA and I just thought, well, what's the worst that could happen? Let me just submit and see. And I really enjoyed it. I think I've learned loads of, excellent techniques to writing. I've discovered loads of new authors and genres and styles of kind of storytelling that I wasn't kind of previously aware of. And it's just been a real kind of confidence boosting opportunity for me.
Hi, my name is Salma. So I actually chose to apply for SSDA because I wanted to challenge myself in terms of like growing my techniques and growing my skills as a writer. So most of my work is in form of poetry. So I wanted to see if I could really grow my wings and see if I can do good in short fiction and even think of pursuing novel writing in future. And I think that it did offer me that opportunity because I saw myself grow, and doing these 3 short stories was an opportunity for me to actually see how much I could really, really like scale myself as a writer. And I think it really boosted my confidence in the process as well.
Great. So it sounds like for all of you, it really was a sort of, I guess, a sandbox in which to play this incubator fellowship. And all of you coming from, slightly different angles. Zanta, you're a current student. Salma, you've completed your MA, albeit in a different format, primarily in poetry. And then Josephine, as you say, you're sort of just biting the bullet and really using this as something to try and experiment from scratch. So I think it's really sort of nice to have you all with those different different backgrounds coming into the program. So I just wanted to maybe just talk a little bit about the setup for the program. So it ran over I think 3 months, and then you had a selection of different workshops, 6 different online workshops covering editing and writing, and then how to prepare a submission, what it's like, what an agent looks for, perhaps a little bit more about the publishing industry as well. So it really is a sort of start to finish. I'd like to maybe ask, perhaps I'll start with Salma. Can you just talk a little bit about the sort of first interactions at the first time when you were all online? How did that work? What was the vibe with the different writers? Did you know any of the other writers in advance, or how did you all get to know each other?
And to be honest, I was a bit anxious at first. I was like, I don't know how this is going to be. Like, I'm a bit awkward with like online stuff. but actually it was so good. Like the energy was so good. There was so much warmth. It kind of like felt like we connected, and having the Slack platform by itself allowed us to also like grow our connections and just feel at ease with each other. And you kind of like felt like we're a group of writers who are not competing. It felt like a collaborative process, and everyone was there um, to just help and to just support each other. And I really, really love that energy. So it was really good.
Just talk a little bit. You mentioned the Slack platform there. What's the Slack platform, and how did you use that?
So it's like a platform that was created, I presume, by Rachel and the team, and we kind of like had an opportunity to like share our stories there, and we also had discussions. And sometimes people would just share resources that they've seen online, or opportunities or on submissions that they've seen online. So it kind of like allowed us to connect beyond just having this workshops that were mandatory, but we also had other opportunities to also scale ourselves. And that, I think that was like, it's something that I felt like it became like an ongoing mentorship thing throughout.
And did you have a chance, when you put some writing on the Slack platform, did you critique other writers' work? Did they critique your work? How did that part of the program work?
When we were doing our stories, we did have sort of like workshop opportunities. I think we did have sessions where, I remember we did have sessions where we discussed each other's work, and we shared what we learned from their stories, what they could work on, what was okay, and stuff like that. So for me, even the workshop process allowed me to also grow myself as a writer, even in the process of sharing, or even in the process of looking at other people's work, because it changed the way I saw my own writing, and it changed the way I saw other people's writing as well. I don't know if that makes sense. Because before, when you get into a workshop, you kind of like feel like you are being stripped naked, and kind of like feels like you're being vulnerable. But for some reason, the environment that Rachel had created allowed us to really feel comfortable. And even when you're critiquing somebody's work, it doesn't feel like it comes from a place of hate. It does feel like it comes from a place of constructive criticism to allow you to really shape your work to be better.
And that's so interesting for you as well, having been through a creative writing MA and still perhaps feeling a little bit fearful about having your work critiqued. So thank you for sharing that with us. And Josephine, I guess for you, having not really ever done any, as I understand it, any sort of formal workshops in that way, how did you find that process? How did you go into it? What were you nervous?
Yeah, so similar to Salma, like, yeah, I just can be very nervous of online things, and but probably felt a bit more comfortable that it was online, I guess. It was a bit nerve-wracking because you're submitting, your work, but I think that was probably one of the biggest things that drew me to the program, because when I spoke to other people that had done work that had been published, the biggest challenge was not really having initially anyone to just steer you in the right direction, or to just even have the readers kind of feedback that, okay, this is what I understood as I was reading. Because I guess as a writer, you're quite clear sometimes in your head of what you're doing, the world you're trying to build. It was really valuable because sometimes I was adamant that the theme was this, and this is the message, and this is the motivation of this character. People are reading it, they're like, oh, I saw something else, or I assumed this was happening instead of, and you don't always kind of get that when you're writing. So to me that was just really such a powerful thing to have, because sometimes as well, like, the group would give you suggestions that, oh, I thought this was happening, and or this was what you were trying to convey. You think, well, actually it wasn't, but that's a good idea. That's a good idea. I might take it in that direction. So for me, the feedback only made our work stronger. I think I learned so much through getting to see what other people were writing as well. So
I love that idea of doing things in your work that you're not intentionally having there. That that's very much part of interpreting someone else's work.
Yeah.
live with the other authors is really really interesting way of doing it. And Zanta, can you tell us a little bit? So we talked there about sort of the peer critique. Can you talk a little bit about how the sort of editing workshop, which I believe you did with Olumide Popula, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you had obviously your editors assigned to you. So can you talk about how you worked there with the Short Story Day Africa editors on your pieces?
I don't know where I broke off, but I'll just start afresh. Yeah, the pro it felt like a very safe environment. One thing was that it was very collaborative. The editors were really working with us to edit our work. So that I think that for me was the most rewarding experience of the editing process, because in a way their line notes were also asking you stuff that you hadn't thought about, and then you're like, oh, okay. So I really enjoyed that, because sometimes editing can feel, I don't know, heartbreaking, because you just see red lines across everything you've written. So that was, I think having explanations just for that and going from that all the way to seeing the final piece has made editing feel less daunting now. I trust editors more now. I don't know if that's a good thing, but
going into the incubator scheme, had you had experience of working with editors before? Had you had your work edited?
Yes, I had definitely had my work edited before. I'd had some good experiences and some very horrible. I came in middle, quite like Rachel and her team to create an environment where we were able to kind of stand by what we had written as well. They said it was okay to stand by it as well. But you could fight and not feel like you're in like a war room where so you could stand by what you had written, which was really good. So that I think it to that safe.
It's such an important part, obviously, of the process of any writer's creative journey, but learning how to be edited as well as how to edit. It's one thing to learn how to edit your own work, but to learn how to take criticism and critique, and of course to hold your ground can be, it comes with time and with practice, but having the chance to practice that in this sort of safe environment, I think is one of the, for me, from what I've seen of the program, is one of the real strengths of the team. And having both Helen Moffat and Rachel Zadok working with you, I mean, you're really getting the best of the best there. So certainly when I've talked to the writers who've been on the scheme, I think that's something that all of them have said, that the number of hours and hours of editing that has gone in behind the scenes for each of you to come out with these stories has been a huge commitment on both sides, on your side and from Helen and Rachel's side. So I wonder if we can move a little bit to talk about three of the specific stories that are in the sampler. So we've got I've got one from each of you, and I know these stories because I've proofed them, and I very much enjoyed proofing them. And it's really nice to come back and talk to each of you, because being at a little bit more of a distance myself, I hadn't seen any of them until they came to me at this stage, and they're all so different and so exciting, each in their different ways. I wonder, Salma, if we could maybe start with your story that I have here, The Circle of History. Could you just give us a summary, a very, very brief summary of your story, where it's set, in a sort of just a précis of the story itself, perhaps without giving any spoilers?
The story is set in Buntwani. Buntwani is a place in Malindi where I was brought up. And I actually chose that place because I have never seen much visibility of that place. Like, I've never seen that place being represented anywhere or being talked about. And it's quite a beautiful place, but in a weird way, I don't know how to describe it. It's that beach that people rarely go to, but when we go there, when I go there, I would say with my family, we always feel like we love being there. But then it always seems like as if it takes time for us to plan another trip to go there. It's very weird. I don't know how to explain this, but that was the connection that I had with that place. I thought of setting the story, the circle of history, in that particular place. And it's actually, I would say, in one line, it's a spell. The story itself revolves around a spell that is cast by the sea, and it's a spell that is cast by unimaginable love and kind of like rotates and comes back in different ways, but not just love. There's that sense of betrayal, there's that sense of death and disconnection and family and deceit. So that's what circle of history is, and it just shows a form of legacy that is not always like portrayed. So people usually talk about legacy in terms of, oh, there's generational wealth, or there's that idea of leaving behind something big that people would talk about generations to generations. But then in this particular family, the legacy itself is death, is loss, is deceit. So I wanted to bring that other element of legacy, not just being in the positive side of things. Maybe it could be in the other side as well. Also, the other thing that I wanted to talk about in Circle of History is to talk about connection and family, because I grew up in a very close knitted family, and there was a kind of like I learned so much from my grandparents, and I wanted to bring that out in the story, in the idea of food, when Narman was scrapping the boozy, helping the grandmother in that, how tales are told in different families, how there's so much wisdom and there's so much information that is being passed across. This knowledge that is not received in school but is received in other forms and in traditional ways, and it's still very informative, and it still shapes the way the child grows. So I also wanted to kind of like highlight how information is shared in an African household from like birth going up.
And I think what you're saying there about how, you know, you wanted to write something because you hadn't read anything else set in that area, that region. That's what's so powerful about your story in particular, is that I felt that I was absolutely right there with you, and I even have little bits, you know, not very much, but little bits in Kiswahili, which take us right into the atmosphere and the you know, and the community, and also very importantly not italicized. You have this sort of little snippets of Kiswahili integrated into the narrative, which I think works really very well. You also have this sort of dual structure, really, you know, your framing of the sort of story, and then another part of the story being told, so you're almost commenting on the story as it is being told. Do you want to just talk a little bit about how the story started, or did you start to write it as one straight narrative and then put the framing around it? How did it emerge?
Actually, I was challenging myself to have all my three stories in different forms. So there's one that is actually like this long poem. So for me, this was a challenge of kind of like, oh, let's try this type of form. Would it work? So I started, it just started like just like a normal short story. And then I sat down with myself and thought of different ways in which the story could be more engaging, and it could feel as if it's happening in the now, and you could feel how everything is coming up. That's why I had to sit down and think about this other form in which it will feel as if the different conversations, which are either like internal or external, and they're just overlapping, and so at some point they just feel very distant from each other. So that was my intention. So I shaped it in, I don't know, it just came in bits and pieces, and then I just started to bring them all together.
I mean, that's interesting because, of course, what we're seeing here is the sampler. So we've got one story from you each here, but you produced 3 stories each for the anthology. And were you conscious of that? Were, in some ways, from what you're saying there, Salma, was each of those pieces almost in conversation with each other? Did you try to get a balance across the 3 pieces?
I think at some point I did try to do that, but then I also told myself that each story has its own message and each story has to carry its own, as we're saying, legacy. So I just wanted to kind of like distance myself and find that kind of like own voice, a unique voice for each particular story. But I feel like at some point when I go through all the 3 stories together, I feel like there is a bit of a connection in terms of the voice, which you can see in all the 3 stories. I think somebody reads them, they will know all these stories are written by this particular writer, because there is something that still shows that there is that uniqueness in there.
But you mentioned there about one of your other stories there being more of a poem, and more of a prose poem, is it?
Actually, that one was inspired by Bernadette Evaristo. I don't remember which was her book that I read. It's Island something. I forgot. I don't want to misquote it. But then I read that it was like a long poem. I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I just thought about prayer times, and because the idea of the prayer times is like, it looks like a cycle. You kind of like finish this prayer and then you wait for 2 to 3 hours. There's another prayer. You keep doing that for the rest of your life. I was like, oh, maybe that should be a poem. Kind of like starting from somewhere and going to the finish line and then coming back again. So that's how I chose the story prayer times to kind of like be like this long poem that just kind of like brings that element of hypnotism throughout. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, well, that's such a teaser for the actual anthology. I'm really desperate to read that one now. So is that called Prayer Time, that particular story, Salma? Yeah.
Yes.
So we'll look out for that one. Oh, fascinating. Thank you. Well, I've got lots more questions, but we'll come back to it at the end. Then Josephine, your story, I remember when I was proofing it halfway through. I mean, I'll ask you to give a little praise of your story. There's a part certain way through your story where it goes off in a radically different direction to what I was expecting. So I love that within a short story. It's so exciting. I found it so exciting. Hard to talk about it without giving anything away though. So do you want to, shall we just get you to just talk a little bit about the theme of the story, just sort of summarize what it's about, and then I'll ask you a couple more questions.
The story really is, I guess, like exploring like neurodivergence, the ways in which some people within a particular community, in my mind I had Nigerians because I'm Nigerian and I grew up around predominantly Nigerians, the ways in which like some people can view it. Yeah, for me, I wanted to really live around, to camp there, because I feel like, I think literature is exploring it more, but I think even just society is having to like face it more, particularly, that community. I say them particularly because I there are certain spaces where people would rather kind of make it about faith. It's really hard to give it away, but yeah, it explores neurodivergence. It explores the relationship between, I guess, a mother and a child. It explores faith. It explores aspirations, expectations, and I think it asks important questions along the way.
So I was going to say, in very stark contrast to Salma's story, your story is set not in Africa, but very definitively in London. In fact, you're situating the reader very clearly because you use this framing of different bus routes. I'm not sure if they're real bus routes or made up bus routes.
So do you know what? Initially things were real. Then I started to make them up. Yeah.
I must admit, when I was proofing it, I did start to look at the 173 Tibetan. Does that really exist? Can I retrace? Can I go on a sort of literary journey and retrace the steps of your characters? But that's obviously a very different sort of setting, a very urban setting. And do you want to just talk about why there? We start at the Lordship Lane bus stop. What is that? Somewhere you know yourself? Is that routes that you've taken? Tell us about that inspiration.
I definitely feel like I've spent like a lot of my life on buses. It sounds so weird, but for just a good chunk of my life, I was just always on a bus. And yeah, I think I kind of got into books really on buses. The idea of the buses was more around the timing, because I wanted to find ways in which to like explore the subject from a way that maybe like would be kind of relatable, wouldn't be like offensive. Yeah. And so I guess to me, the idea of the buses was kind of linked to like timing and facts and details. And this person's kind of importance of the facts and the details and timing. And I just felt like it's such a normal part of everyday life. But I felt like I just wanted to write about things that I can say, like, I really know that. I know that well. Because where I have, I was born in Nigeria. I was there till I was 4 or 5, and then came to the UK. Fortunately, I've had the chance to visit Nigeria many times. I love it there. Tried to move there at one point. But I felt like I wanted to just, whatever I was writing, write very confidently. So it was just important that I stayed true to who I am as I'm writing. So, not trying to necessarily be anyone else, but also place important on the things that are important. Because I felt like that would allow me to write with confidence. Yeah, I felt like I wanted to just write about things I know well. And yeah, buses just happened to be one of them. So yeah.
The timings and the routes and these very specific real places, about also grounding the reader, because you have effectively an unreliable narrator in the story. And so perhaps there's something there about, about just allowing us to be situated in a certain way. I certainly found it very helpful. And then there's, you wrong foot us brilliantly in a couple of ways. There's a couple of characters you refer to, and we don't know who these people are. I really want everybody to read this, and we can reconvene, and then we can talk, really examine this, because there's so much to talk about in this story. But I wonder if that's that's perhaps part of it that makes it work so well, is that we have these sort of juxtapositions of those two things. And just to finish on that, Josephine, your title for this, Good Things Come, I only sort of now looking at it, knowing how the story ends. Tell us about that title. When did you name it? Halfway through, at the beginning, at the end?
No, I think I wanted it to be called Good Things Come, so I started first with a title. But I think the Good Things Come links back to, I guess, the saying, obviously, good things come to those who wait, but also to like the kind of theme of faith, which is like a big aspect of the story, because I guess the belief is that the character, I guess, time and waiting is a massive detail in her life, and the same with her mother as well. And I initially started with the title because I thought, gosh, that's an idea I want to explore, about like waiting and time and expectation. Really
intriguing when you're sort of writing around the title. There's so much more to say about that story. But let's go to you, Xanta. So Xanta, your setting is very, very different again. Would you like to just introduce your story, which is actually a shorter story, Heaven's Mouth, very succinct, but so much in there. And again, you've got a concept there that we're sort of introduced to, and you explore, which is very different from both Salma and Josephine's stories. This is a lovely contrast.
So I also kind of had the title first. I think I had Heaven's Mouth just stuck in my head, and then I kind of started writing around that, and I imagined a town where time has stopped, really, where no one ages. And I was like, okay, that has been done before, but like, what do I add to it? I think most of my writing kind of always writing towards a freedom, is always writing towards giving characters options of breaking a cycle or getting out of something. So I'm always thinking of writing towards some kind of freedom. And I think that's what I tried to do with this character leaving and coming back. And of course, his very tense relationship with his mother.
I was saying, Xanta, did you start off, when you were writing it, you had your title, did you start off knowing it was going to be a speculative piece? Were you heading in that direction from the outset?
Not really. I think when I started it out, I didn't think it would be speculative. I was also very much thinking about home, like thinking about Swaziland as a place that, not much happens, not much changes. So that was also kind of the grounding. I was like, it feels like this place is stuck in time, but it is moving forward. So in my head in the beginning, that's kind of where I was going with it, to be honest. It wasn't meant to be speculative. And then, obviously, getting into the program, and then it developed.
The form and the genre, it doesn't matter, it's allowed you to say what you wanted to say, so that's fascinating that you actually had Swaziland perhaps in your head, and then it's developed into this.
Yeah.
Your other pieces, Xanta, in the collection, are they where are they set?
It's set in an alternative Swaziland, but it's more like an origin story. My character can walk, and then everyone else kind of can't, and it's based on the evolution on how he just becomes the first person who can walk when they all kind of slither like snakes. And it's based on Swazi mythology as well. Yeah, I think imagining different versions of where I'm from was a huge part of this program, I think. I think all my stories. Yeah, I was just saying that I think all my stories have that reimagining Swaziland as something else.
Interesting for me, what from what you've described with that story and this one, your protagonist is differentiating himself in this case from the rest of the community. So in this one, your protagonist makes a clear decision to whether or not he stays in this community. And from what you're saying about your other story, being the one person that can walk and can be different. So is there sort of something else that you're trying to say through that?
I don't know. I don't think I had thought about it. I think like Josephine said, you set intentions for a story, and then people read it a different way, and I think maybe that's what's happening. But I just think there is a sense of being an outsider that I have, that I also think I put into my work, and even without realizing, I think it's filtering in clearly, because I think it's always someone feeling outside of something.
I'm wondering perhaps about the sort of element of non-conformity there. Perhaps that's a better way of describing it, with across both these stories. But as you say, that sort of element of an outsider has, being in your current situation, being in Norwich, being in the UK outside Swaziland, has that given you, well, obviously it's given you a different perspective on Swaziland, but do you see the sort of writing that you're doing now from the UK different, or how would you describe that?
I think someone had asked me this and I said I'd get back to them. I don't know. I think because the program has been so busy, we haven't had time to kind of process, but I think there is a sense that it has changed. I think sometimes writing from a place about that place is different from writing about it from outside it, looking in. I think both have valid views about what they achieve, but there's also certain things that you can see differently depending on which position you're in. And I think because I started writing within the place that I'm writing about to outside, I think there has been a kind of, it's like what Sisonke Simang calls like writing from the wound and writing from the scar type of thing, where sometimes writing from the wound is very like urgent and very like powerful, but there isn't perspective. And I think sometimes stepping out gives you perspective. I think writing from here has given me a certain kind of perspective that I didn't have while I was there, and an insight that I don't think I would have gotten if I was still writing from there, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And and I suppose in a way you're right, it's perhaps a bit of a well-worn question, but I see it so often with my own writers, African writers that I represent, people that are writing something and then perhaps are based in the UK and then go back to their particular country or country where they have relatives, and it really infuses the writing, but then they need to sort of have that element of distance to perhaps not put everything in it, to maybe to distill it. And it's really interesting, part of what being an African writer I think is about as well, which is, it's really a bigger discussion perhaps, but really fascinating. So just if I get for all three of you, perhaps just to wrap up with a couple of final points. I was just one thing, as I was talking both to you there, Josephine in particular, and Zanta, I just wondered if you were conscious of other influences on your writing in particular. Josephine, when you were talking, I was thinking very much about, I just grabbed it off my shelf, Ashley Hickson Lovence's 392, which is set on a bus. I don't know if you knew of that book or about it. No, and Zanta, your writing reminds me, elements of that, of Abubakar Adam Ibrahim. Some of his work set in his short stories are set in a place called Zango, also Whispering Trees. Just conscious, perhaps for all of you, are you aware of these other sort of influences and trying actively or not actively to either draw on those or sometimes to try not to draw on those? You just each say a word about other writers that you perhaps are in conversation with.
So I think around the time of writing this story, I just discovered Carmen Maria Machado.
Yes.
And I'd read The Husband Stitch. And I think what I really loved about this program is I think it made me realize that I'd sort of been a bit of like I don't want to say lazy reader, but I think because I guess literature in school is kind of quite limited, I would say. I'd say it's limited. And I think it wasn't until I kind of a bit older and I was kind of searching for more, you're a bit curious, and I discovered the Chimamandas, and just I love an author called Cyprian Quenzi. You just think, oh my goodness. So I think when I came on the program, I think there was Murakami, who honestly, I'm not going to pretend I'd never ever read anything by Murakami. There's so many. I remember like Salma and Zanta, people would be sharing books they're reading and I'd be like writing them down. But I discovered, because I think I remember Rachel saying subvert, reimagine, which is kind of like part of the strapline of the program. So I just was kind of Googling, I think experimental fiction and just things along that theme. And then I discovered her and I read The Husband Stitch. And to me, it felt like, there's a story within a story here. And that was part of what allowed me to build Good Things Come, because I felt like actually I want to tell, and I think then I bought another book, which was, the title escapes me now, but it's like a sort of an old book, but it just kind of lays out, I think 99 different writing styles. And so I felt like I want to tell this story, but I want to see if I could explore the idea of I'm telling the past, I'm telling the present, but it's all part of the same story leading to one final destination. And that was the influence, I would say, behind this, the idea of could I tell a tale within a tale that's still one big story.
Thank you. I mean, you've touched on such a massive thing there, that obviously what we also get from being in these peer groups with other writers is not just what they're writing, but of course the influences that come onto them, exactly. And recommendations. It's like being in a book group when you're writing circle.
Yeah, exactly. I really enjoyed it for that.
And just very briefly, because I'm conscious of time, Salma or Azanta, anything else to add on influences?
I think for me, at the time when I wrote the story, I was really much reading a lot of Asian writers, so Han Kang, and I was reading, Ocean Vuong and Lawrence Chua, and of course my own peers who I'm always reading, TJ Benson, Remy, Troy, like all these people that I'm with, I feel like I'm with, but obviously I don't know. So yeah, at the time that those were my biggest influences, and it was this thing of I have to break the mold. I don't know. I just felt like Josephine's saying is like this thing of just like subverting and reimagining something, because I always feel like sometimes most stories have been told. We have a lot of stories about a mother and a son who don't have a good relationship, but what am I doing differently with it? So it's always that idea, because I'm always like, I don't think I can write something like that's groundbreakingly new. What I can do is find a very common threaded story about a love and a hate between a man and a son, and throw in this weird wonky town. That was my thinking and my influences.
Fascinating. And then Salma, just to wrap up on you, were you conscious of other writers, or were there other writers you read as you were doing writing these stories?
Yeah, I think people like Khadija Bajaber, Troy, Idza, like Kenyan writers who at some point became my friends, and I found that relatability with them, and that kind of like having that commonality and sharing some similar views on different things really, really allowed me to see how I can pave my way as a writer who is very different, but at the same time has these common denominators with other writers. So I think having friends who are also writers and who are not just starting, but they've also grown and they can kind of like guide you along the way is so essential. And I would say like Khadija Bajaber has like been very, very instrumental in my journey. She is the writer of House of Rust. And something else that has really helped me is going back to the core, like watching or reading things that really allow me to understand more about the type of writing that I want to write. So going back to watch Swahili series. I know most people back home just like they don't want to watch these things. They're like, oh no, we just want to watch like Netflix and all this modern stuff. I'm like, no, I have to go back to the roots and watch these things, understand how our traditions as Africans and all these things. So it has really shaped my understanding and knowing our cultures and the way we do our things. So this has been like a major influence in my work as well.
And then maybe just to wrap up the sort of final thing, is there perhaps words of advice to any writers that might be thinking about sort of embarking on similar workshops or schemes? Very, very succinctly, just crystallize advice to writers thinking of going on these sorts of peer workshops.
So I'd say just go for it, especially if you have nothing else out there, and you have, you've not done any major writing. I'd say just try. You have nothing to lose, really.
I think I would say like face rejections like heads on, because in the journey of being a writer, you face so many rejections. You submit your work to different places, different workshops, maybe different opportunities, and sometimes all you get are just rejection emails. So just embrace them and know that it's not. Sometimes it's not personal, and maybe there are opportunities out there that you've not explored, and maybe you still need to find more time to actually work on yourself, grow your writing, and find your own path until you get to a point whereby you are not invisible anymore. People just see your work and they're like, no, there's no way we're not taking this work. It's so good. It has to he deserves a place in the world.
Salma, you are a wise woman. They are very good words. Thank you. Good words of advice. And Santa.
I think, yeah, whoever wants to do it should do it. It's either going to deepen your love for it or break your spirit and you're done. But either way, I think it does shift some. It really, I also think it sets you up. Either you really are a writer or you're not. Because I think, as Salma said, with the rejections, I could have stopped writing a long time ago. But I really think these programs really kind of deepen your knowledge, deepen your love for it, or help you figure out what you actually want to do. So I really think it is a good way to figure out something, whether you like it or you don't. But I think it is a good way to also then figure out if you like it or you don't, and what kind of a writer you are.
Yeah, thank you, Zanta. I think that's really helpful as well. And I think one of the things that whenever I am looking to take an author on is to see what sort of support networks they have. So if it's amazing if a writer can sit in a bedroom by themselves and create an incredible epic novel, fantastic. But actually, we all need, like you're saying about rejections, we all need those networks. And I think possibly just being able to compare experiences with other writers, if you're not the only one being rejected from, lots and lots of different things before you get your work accepted. So yeah, I think there's that sort of solidarity. And I hope very much that you as your peer group within the incubator program will continue, and you sort of got those people as your sort of sounding boards now. So I think that's a very valuable part of the program, as well as coming out with some published stories to be able to put onto your CVs. So it's great. Well, thank you very, very much, all of you, for sparing the time to talk today. It's lovely to see you all. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of the stories as well. So thank you very, very much, and see you guys soon.